Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Señores oyentes de Usala Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda. Les habla Fernando Mendez, dirige este programa Phil Fisher. Bueno, acabamos de ver un partido entre Brasil y Croacia, un partido bastante peleado. Llegó a los 30 minutos extra y luego a los penales y Croacia superó a Brasil. Fallaron 2 veces los brasileros y se han quedado fuera del Mundial. Croacia avanza ahora y depende de quién gane entre Argentina y Inglaterra. Ellos se enfrentan al ganador de ese partido y ya veremos qué sucede con eso. Mi predicción es que Inglaterra va a ganar, pero veremos porque Argentina es un equipo bastante fuerte. Así que este está, como dicen, pues cara al sello, depende cómo les vaya en el partido del sábado. Bueno, cambiando de lengua, Croatia defeated Brazil just a few minutes ago before we started the show. Croatia and Brazil went to extra time, 30 minutes extra time, and then to penalties. Croatia tied with only 1 minute left in the extra time. And then in the penalties, Brazil failed to score twice. So Neymar and Brazil will go home, and Croatia will face the winner of the game between England and Argentina. So that's the news from Usala Media about the World Cup for the time being. There are more interesting news developments in the world. As we know, the invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin, it has not been what he thought was going to be an easy walk, in which the Russians will be greeted by Ukrainians with flowers. Instead, the Ukrainians have resisted the Russian attack, and Putin is now faced with a long winter and the consequences of an invasion that was poorly planned, poorly implemented, in which thousands of people have been injured, many hundreds died on both sides. But it's one of those things that happen in wars, as in sports. You never know until the actual battle. You never know what's going to happen. So Putin is in trouble at home also, because there were many Russians opposed to the war who were marching. But as we know, this is not a democracy. It's not like the United States, where people are allowed to march, to demonstrate against the government. So probably most of the demonstrators in Russia will end up in prison. It's not comparable to what happened here on January 6th, but it's one of those events in history again where when you rise against your government, you better face the possible consequences. If you attack the king, you better kill the king, because otherwise it will come back at you. And that's the case in Russia, where Putin is a little bit too strong, and no matter who is opposing him right now, the outcome is fairly predictable that he will remain in power. One sign of perhaps weakness or an attempt to reconcile, reestablish relationship, diplomatic relationship with this country, with the United States, is that he let go of the basketball star Greer that had been captured because supposedly she was carrying marijuana into Russia, and she spent months in captivity, and she had been condemned to 9 years, I believe, of prison in a Russian prison, which is probably something that we don't want to see. The good news is that she is home now, and she was exchanged. That's a bit controversial. She was exchanged, she was traded for a man who is known as a killer, a man who sells weapons, who is responsible for atrocities around the world, and he had been captured and served, and he was in prison in the United States with many more years to go, but he was let go in exchange for the liberation of Greer, the basketball star. So she is now home, and her family is probably celebrating at this point. Another part of the controversy is that there is a man who's a prisoner who was captured by the Russians, and they claim that he was a spy. And so in this country, people were complaining that he should have been one of the people exchanged for this Russian terrorist, because that's what he is. He's a man who has caused a lot of death around the world. But we will follow the news as we progress. The city right now, the country is celebrating the arrival of Greer to Texas. I believe she was undergoing an exam in Texas. Other national news having to do with politics. Kristen Sinema, Democratic senator who had been, along with Joe Manchin, had been instrumental in giving the Biden administration a hard time from the beginning. Both of them failed to agree with the president on many occasions and sided with the Republicans. So we will see what path she takes, but for the time being, she will still side with the Democrats. She says she will, but it's not a sure thing at the moment. Where the Democrats were ready to celebrate having a majority in the Senate as a result of the Georgia election, in which Raphael Warnock defeated Herschel Walker. Experts are still looking at that election, and the fact that Herschel Walker was basically he was a Trump candidate. He did not belong in any kind of political race. He was an embarrassment for the average Republican. He was only supported by the fringes, and he was an embarrassment for Mitch McConnell and other Republicans. The only official support he received from the leadership was from Marjorie Taylor Greene and people like Kevin McCarthy, who obviously have no shame. How can you support a man who is ethically challenged, who was found to have many children out of wedlock, who had encouraged some of his partners to have abortions and to pay for them, for a man who claims to be opposed to abortion? So this is one blemish, another blemish on the Republican Party, that they were able to put up a candidate who was obviously unqualified to serve. But now we have Raphael Warnock returning to the Senate. Now he will be there for 6 years. He had, in a short period of 3 years, he had 2 elections. So I'm sure he is happy to give it a rest. He ran a very smart campaign. If you have a chance, you can find some of his ads during the campaign in which Herschel Walker is shown speaking about werewolves and vampires. And he said that he would rather be a vampire. So that kind of conversation is what caused him to lose. The Democratic Party, in the meantime, prepares to face 2 things. One, they don't have enough candidates in the House to oppose some legislation proposed by the Republicans, who will dedicate their time. I mean, they have already threatened to do this. They promise to carry out investigations of the January 6th committee and investigations into Hunter Biden, the president's son. We understand that Hunter Biden is a flawed character. Nobody would defend his character. He has a bad record already, and it's hard to explain how he could maneuver to discredit his father, but there we are. So the Republicans will take advantage of that situation to sort of try to attach as much shame as possible to the Biden administration. This individual has almost nothing to do with the presidency, in the same way that, let's say, Jimmy Carter's brother was also attacked, attaching him to the president and trying to shame Jimmy Carter about his brother. So we have seen Republicans unable to find a platform to run on. The only thing they have promised is to be opposed to anything the Democrats propose, and to be in the search of more controversy attacking the Biden administration about Hunter Biden, attacking the Biden administration for the support of Ukraine. So one thing that the Democrats have been able to achieve before the Republicans take over in January, Nancy Pelosi celebrated emotionally a victory to protect the rights of people of the same sex getting married. So that's one thing. The LGBTQ people were also celebrating that legislation because, as we know, in the Republican Party, they are planning to do as much as possible to undermine the rights of homosexual people, the rights of any members of LGBTQ groups. And that's something the Biden administration has been trying to protect. So one more victory for the Democrats in that sense. We don't know what the ultimate consequences will be of having Senator Sinema now sort of not switching parties exactly, but declaring that she's not going to act as a Democrat, that she's going to caucus with the Democrats, but that she would not follow the agenda of the Democratic Party. So that could be, in the long run, could be a problem for the Biden administration. One thing that I do celebrate, and I feel that it was probably time for Joe Manchin to lose so much power that he had over the Biden administration. So we're happy to have Raphael Warnock sort of given a slight edge. I don't know what the margin is right now in view of Sinema's defection, but the margin still remains in favor of the Democratic Party. We have a Republican House and a Democratic Senate and a president who is supported by the Democrats. So we'll see what happens with that. So we're going to take a brief pause here in Usala Media. Están escuchando La Mesa Redonda, les habla Fernando Mendez, and Phil Fisher dirige este programa. Regresamos en un momento. Pagano's Market and Bar has been serving gourmet Italian foods in Center City for 3 generations. Call Matthew Pagano for all your catering needs, and during these difficult times, please mention Fernando Mendez and receive a nice discount along with free delivery. Pagano's also makes the finest gift boxes in the city for all your holiday needs. Visit paganosmarketandbar.com. Señores oyentes de Usala Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Phil Fisher dirige este programa. Como mencioné anteriormente, el intercambio de prisioneros entre Rusia y Estados Unidos acaba de ocurrir con el resultado de que Britney Greer, estrella del básquetbol, está ahora de regreso a Estados Unidos y aterrizó en Texas, donde va a ser examinada por los médicos. Aparentemente está en buenas condiciones, según observadores y gente que viajó con ella en el avión que la trajo a Estados Unidos desde Arabia Saudita, donde el intercambio ocurrió. Cuando yo vi fotografías de esto, de un video del intercambio, vi que estaba una persona vestida en traje árabe. Yo no entendía la razón, pero luego supe que se trata de un intercambio que ocurrió en territorio de Arabia Saudita, que los árabes facilitaron el intercambio. Entonces, repito, en inglés ahora, WNBA star Britney Griner, whom Russia convicted on trumped-up drug traffic charges after she was detained while carrying hashish, vape cartridges at an airport near Moscow in February. She was released on Thursday after the United States agreed to a detainee swap for Victor Bout, B-O-U-T, una persona que ha sido acusada de un criminal reconocido por todo el mundo. So apparently this Victor Bout had been condemned to 25 years in prison by the U.S. court in 2012. Bout gained notoriety during his career as one of the world's most prolific suppliers weapons and to groups like Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. But the Biden administration said on Thursday it had determined prior to the swap that he no longer posed a U.S. security threat. Maybe that's a way of trying to explain the swap, but I think an individual with the connections of this Russian is not easily persuaded to change his stripes. So let's not be surprised if we hear very soon that he's again engaged in the same business, especially with the support of Vladimir Putin, which apparently that's what it's one of his sponsors. There was another news about Iran. As we know, there are protests in Iran because of the killing of a woman that had been captured by the fashion police. And after this became public, women and men marched in the streets of Tehran and all around the country, basically, asking for a change of government, asking for the end of the theocracy that has ruled Iran ever since the Shah was deposed. It's one of those countries in the grip of Islamic rule that has banished the rights of women, and we have no influence on Iran. We have had no friendly relationship with Iran since the deposing of the Shah, at a point also in which the American embassy was captured by the members of that revolution. And as we recall, the embassy workers, the embassy people were released only when Ronald Reagan came to power. So Jimmy Carter had suffered the consequences of that takeover of the American embassy in Tehran, and I think he lost prestige. He had a rescue attempt that failed because of trouble with the helicopters in the desert and so on. But it was Reagan who took the credit for the release of the hostages. It's a movie about that rescue attempt. Anyway, so Iran again in the news because Mohsen Shekari, a 23-year-old protester, was hanged by Iranian authorities on Thursday morning, becoming the first person executed in connection with widespread demonstrations over the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini in police custody. So that has been going on in Iran for a few months now. The authorities accused Shekari of blocking a street during the protests and stabbing a member of the Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps. And what appeared to be sort of a fake announcement, someone in the Iranian government declared that they had disbanded this fashion police, this religious police that had harassed women all over the country. Any woman who did not follow the prescriptions of the Iranian government as to how to dress, cover their faces, and do not wear skirts, short skirts, and so on. So that's from Iran. Another place in the news is China. rolling back pandemic restrictions in the wake of many demonstrations around the country. People were asking for the resignation of Xi Jinping. People are upset about the restrictions imposed because of the pandemic. As we know, that pandemic has not left. There are many people in this country affected by it, and now we have run into the situation where the COVID and the flu have sort of contributed to many people feeling sick in this country. A Chinese Communist Party official last month argued that the restrictions were damaging China's economic standing. The Biden administration announced actions on Thursday to bail out the cash-strapped pension used by many members of the influential Teamsters Union. So that's a local news, national news. The Teamsters, as we know, have lost a little bit of prestige in this country as to be one of the strongest unions. And the unions in general have suffered for lack of membership, and also because for so many years they refused to accept minorities in great numbers. And we know that Hispanics were not welcome into many of the unions, electricians union, roofers union, the Teamsters, and so on. But now that the ranks have dwindled, they were attempting to correct that fact. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, their pension fund was running short of money, so the government has come to their aid with a tag of $36 billion. So the money will come from appropriated in the American Rescue Plan. That's where the money will come from. The Food and Drug Administration announced on Thursday it had amended its emergency use authorizing Pfizer and Moderna to update bivalent COVID-19 vaccines, allowing children as young as 6 months old to receive the booster 2 months after completing their primary series of the original vaccine. So it's important to know this. Children, young children are now more are eligible to receive the vaccine. Los, we're going to take a short break here en Usala Media. Les habla Fernando Mendez. Regresamos en un momento.
There is a road laid out for me, leading down to
boxes everywhere. And this is gonna be Addie's room.
I am blind, but I need not see.
I think you're really gonna like it.
I know this road is there for me. There is a love waiting for me.
First night here, but Amy seems cool.
Waist down by the river. I am blind, but I need not see. I know this love is there for me.
Nice and slow.
If
I got
I'm
this.
free, take me down to the river
Nice.
and wash me.
Okay. What do you think?
Señores oyentes de Usala Media, estamos aquí de nuevo en la mesa redonda. Les habla Fernando Mendez con otros temas que hemos tratado. Una de las razones por las cuales la administración de Biden se encuentra en problemas es por el costo de la gasolina. Pero en ese momento, como resultado de algunas acciones del gobierno, el precio está bajando, y esto nos va a ayudar mucho en esta época de Navidad. There is an interview on CNN with Paul Whelan, and he's the man who's still in the hands of the Russians. So if you're interested in following that story, we know that Britney Griner, the basketball star, was freed in a swap, but many people are complaining that this other American, Paul Whelan, who has been in prison in Russia, he should have been part of that swap. But according to the US government, the Russians were not willing to let go. So only Griner was traded, for, as we mentioned, for that Russian arms dealer. So we don't know what's going to happen with that story. But so the Trump administration is still in the news because there's more findings about documents that they withheld, that were withheld, and that the lawyers representing the former president did not come clean with some of the documents they had in their possession. So that will continue for a while. Now, what we don't know is what, when and how the January 6th committee will issue the final report. It is expected that the report will enable the Justice Department to issue subpoenas to the Trump administration, to the remnants of the administration, that some of the lawyers who are responsible apparently are also under investigation because they signed on false statements, maybe unknowingly, about what was happening with some of the secret documents found at Mar-a-Lago and elsewhere. So we have reached the end of this edition of the Roundtable. Agradecemos mucho su sintonía en el día de hoy. Esperamos hasta la próxima. Nos habló Fernando Mendez. Phil Fisher dirigió este programa. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news.